And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Six years ago, when I first reviewed Heave Ho, I said that it was a fun game and I enjoyed it tremendously, but that it wasn't nearly as good as some of the other games in the Cosmos two-player series, such as Lost Cities, Balloon Cup, Kahuna. I stand by that statement. Lost Cities and Balloon Cup are both tremendous games, and yet I still seem to play Heave. I think I might play this the most of the series at this point in time. Why is that? You know, interesting enough, for those of you who've not ever heard of this before, it's designed by Richard Borg, the same designer of Memoir 44, but this is completely different. And while it is somewhat of an exercise of luck, although there's a bit of speed in the game too, I think I enjoy it much because of the fact that the theme seems to work. Lost Cities, I explain the expedition and such, but it's math. This game is math too, but when people play it, they actually see the tug of war happening. You actually feel it back and forth as the game progresses, and it's a lot of fun. For those of you who don't know how to play, or you've made it forgotten, here's a quick overview of what the game looks like. The game board shows a tug of war between two different teams, and each team has three people on it, and they're printed on the board themselves. There's a whiskey barrel in the center, which will be the focus of attention, but for right now, let's look at one of the players' sides. Here we have three different guys who are tugging on your side, each with a value of 2, each in a different color, red, blue, and green. Now, over the course of a game, you're going to be able to play cards either on your side or on your opponent's side. It's very simple. Play a card, draw a card. Now, you might play a card which helps you out. As you can see, that increases the red gentleman from 2 to 3. But your opponent might play a card that weakens you. For example, changes you down to a 1 there. And you'll go back and forth as you play different cards. There are some white cards, usually the ladies, the dames it calls them, that can be played on any of the scenarios or any of the spots, and there are even cards with 0, which take a guy off the rope at all. But occasionally there is a card, and you can play it on either side, that says Heave Ho, has exclamation points in case you miss the words Heave Ho. When that happens, you add up all the points on your side. 2 plus 4 plus 3 is 9. And then you look at your opponent's side. 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 6. 9 minus 6 is 3. So the barrel is pulled towards your side 3 spaces. If you get the barrel completely to your side, you win. And if the barrel goes to your opponent's side, he wins. If you both run out of cards and have no more cards to play, whoever has the barrel on closest to their side wins. But you don't win the game, you simply win that barrel. And then another barrel is placed out here, and then you play another round to get it. There are also special cards that do different things. The rope breaks, that simply puts the barrel basically back in the middle. You can name a farewell, which lets you name a number and kick everybody out who is that number. One of the more interesting features of the game is that while you have men and women who are willing to help out your side, one of the more interesting characters that comes with the game is the Loch Ness Monster. The only problem with playing her, though, or good old Nessie, is that your opponent may have a card called Monstrous, and if they play that, the person who has the Loch Ness Monster on their side at that point automatically loses. So playing Nessie is a gamble, although if you have that Monstrous card in your hand, a little bit less of a gamble. Now, if you notice there's no middle spot here to start with, that's because what the game does at the beginning is each player is given 20 cards. And they will take these cards and someone says a signal, and you turn over the top 2 cards. And you decide to keep 1 for yourself and give 1 to your opponent. Turning over the next 2 cards, keeping 1 for yourself and 1 to your opponent. Turning over the next 2 cards, keeping 1 for yourself and 1 to your opponent. And you keep doing that until you've split all the cards, at which point you shout, "Stop!" And whoever finishes first, they get to take your opponent's cards and split them up any way they want. Then each player has a deck of 20 cards, 10 that they picked for themselves, or that were picked for them, and then 10 that were picked for them, and they have a deck of 20 cards. The player who finishes first is the person who has the barrel start closer to them. Now that's an interesting speed aspect of the game because you can set the cards up to get them the way you want. There's no really bad card, but you can put cards in your hand that you know will help you with your strategy. And while this isn't recommended for younger players, for example, I don't use this way with my daughter, it's definitely a good way to play the game once you know what you're doing because it adds a lot of fun and you kind of know what cards are in a deck. Since not all 55 cards are used in a game, each player will split up 20, so there's 15 cards that you're not using. You're still not sure exactly what is in the game, but it works out okay in the end. In my opinion, this is a game that's actually aged well. Like I said, it's a game that I keep playing over and over. The Cosmos 2-player series has come out with many games over the past several years, the past 6 years since Heave Ho came out. And yet I still don't find myself playing these newer games nearly as much as Heave Ho. Some of them have tried to go the route of being complex. Heave Ho is very simple. Play good numbers on your side and bad numbers on your opponents. But these special cards kind of throw the mix up a bit because there's one of them that caused Heave Ho, but the lower total wins that battle. And that, things like that keep it interesting back and forth, but it plays very quickly. It's very easy to teach, very quick playing. The theme works because you feel the rope, you see the barrel being tugged back and forth, and I just found that very few people will turn this down. The people I find who don't enjoy this as much as others are perhaps strategy gamers, people who like more complex strategy games. This isn't something that they're as interested in. And I suppose there's a few people who might take offense at the artwork and say, well, that makes fun of the Scottish people and so on and so forth. I actually found it very entertaining. It's very humorous, very cartoony, and certainly adds to the theme. It stood well for me. I'm sad that it's out of print and it's difficult to find, but if you can get a copy of this, I recommend that you try it out. For 2 players, it can be a good way to spend 30 minutes, or even less if you just want to play a couple rounds. But the first person to get 2 barrels or 3 barrels wins, and that doesn't usually take very long. And while I love tug of war in real life, it's one of the most fun team sports you can play, especially when there's mud involved. This is a decent substitute for Inside. One of the best games of this series, and certainly probably the most thematic and a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.